In this video, we're going to review basic graphing vocabulary and then practice plotting our points in the coordinate plane. So to begin, we're just going to start off with some key vocabulary that's related to the coordinate plane. First, you should know that this grid right here is called the coordinate plane, and it's how we graph two-dimensionally in mathematics. And there are two main axes of the coordinate plane. The first one is called the x-axis, and that is the horizontal number line on the coordinate plane. So you'll notice here you have this horizontal number line continuing forever in both directions with positive and negative numbers and 0 in the middle. That line right there is called the x-axis. Then in addition to that, we have the y-axis, which is, as you're probably guessing, the vertical number line on the coordinate plane. So here we have this vertical number line, positive numbers going up, negative numbers going down, and 0 in the middle. So those two number lines have very special names, the x-axis and the y-axis. In addition to the axes, we have two other words that are important and associated with the coordinate plane. The first is called the origin, and the origin is where the y-axis and the x-axis meet. So if you look, here's our y-axis, here's our x-axis, and we're looking for the point where those two lines meet. And if you look right in the middle, there is one point where these two lines meet. This is called the origin point. And the coordinate of the origin point is 0, 0. So that point where the two lines meet, where x is 0 and y is 0, that's called our origin point. Then in addition to that, our coordinate plane is divided up into 4 main quadrants. So here we can see there are 4 areas on this coordinate plane around the origin. Quadrant 1 is right here, where all of the positive numbers are, so where x is positive and y is positive. And then from there we go counterclockwise. So quadrant 2 is over here, where x is negative and y is positive. So you can even put x positive, y positive. Here it's x is negative, y is positive. If we keep going, quadrant 3 is down here, so x is negative, y is negative, and then finally we have quadrant 4 where x is positive and y is negative. So just being aware of these locations, so as we're talking about a graph, you know where quadrant 1 is, the origin, the axes, etc. So in this slide, we're going to practice plotting points using the coordinate plane, and then we're going to, once we plot that point, identify its location, and it'll either be located in a quadrant, on an axis, or at the origin. So the first point we see here is point A, and that's the point 0, 7. So something you need to remember about a coordinate point is it's always going to be the x coordinate, comma, the y coordinate. And essentially what we need to do is we need to find the x coordinate along the x-axis. So here we have x is 0, and then we'd move up to where y is 7. So where x is 0, we then find the matching point where x is 0 and y is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So right here is point A. So we find the meeting point of where x is 0 and y is 7. And then from here I need to determine its location. Well, first here I'm noticing that we're not in one of the key quadrants. This is quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, and quadrant 4, and we're not really in a quadrant, we're kind of on the border. So then I look at my second option, and my second option is that I'm at an axis. And here I notice that my point is actually along the y-axis. So what I'm going to put on this line is that my point is on the y-axis. Then I move on to the second point, and that's 0, -1. So we go to where x is 0, and then y is -1. We find that point where they intersect, and that is point B. So from here again I notice that that is on the y-axis. And then I move to point C, and point C is x is 0, y is 0, which I know to be the origin point. Then I'm going to move on to point D, And this one has two numbers, so it's where x is 2, so I go to where x is 2, which is right here. And then y is negative 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you notice this is the point where it corresponds with 2 on the x-axis up here and negative 6 on the y-axis over here. So I can see clearly that that is point D. And then I look and I notice that I'm actually fully in a quadrant, so I'm going to write that I am in quadrant number 4. And you can write that with Roman numerals or numbers, whatever you like best. Then next we look and we have point E, and point E is where x is negative 9 and y is 0. So notice here my x values only go to negative 7, so I got to extend it a little bit. So x is negative 9 would be about right there, and y is 0. So that is point E. And I notice E is on a line, not in a specific quadrant, so it's on the x-axis. All right, then I'm going to look at point F. So I have where x is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Y is negative 1, 2, 3, 4. So there is point F. And point F is down there in quadrant 4. And then my next point, I'm going to go where x is negative 1, 2, 3. Y is negative 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's point G, and I can see that that's in quadrant 3. And then finally I go to where x is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, y is 0, so that is point H, and I notice that that is on an axis and it's specifically on the x-axis. So this just comes down to slowly finding where the x-axis point, right here the first point, aligns with the y-axis point, which is the second point, and plotting it with a good label and finding its location.